is the emotion that drives the most clicks, earns the most money. Think about it. If there are two videos being recommended to you, one that's praising a well-made game, and one video that's really digging into and criticizing and getting mad at a horrible video game, which one are you more likely to click on? Statistically, more people interact with the negative content, or even rage bait, because it is addictive to rant about things. It can be satisfying to get out all of your emotions about something that you just hate. But these kinds of videos have gotten so popular that it's to the point where I feel like the internet has a genuine problem with being overly hypercritical. Every new game and movie that comes out, you'll see 100 videos and articles on your dash that are like hour-long video essays why the newest Pokemon game or whatever is the worst piece of flaming dog shit garbage to ever grace the earth. And then I've noticed that a lot of people just mindlessly watch YouTube and form all of their opinions based on what the popular YouTubers think, making the overly exaggerated negative opinions the most popular ones. Which may sound like an overly cynical and mean viewpoint in and of itself, but I have seen it happen many times. Take FNAF for instance, where everyone in the fandom fucking loved the creativity of Security Breach and also the Fazbear Frights books, but then a moment that a YouTuber drops a video expressing the opinion that they were badly made, then the entire internet's opinion seemed to shift to align with the new popular consensus. And it isn't bad for a YouTuber to express a negative opinion, but I do think that it's bad that a bandwagon of people just automatically agree without forming an opinion themselves. But then again, FNAF is a fandom famously filled with annoying, stupid fucking children who just swallow game theory like it's the gospel, so maybe that's an unfair example. And most of the people who express the negative opinions about Security Breach and onwards are people who usually haven't kept up with FNAF in a few years. And I'll be real, I think a lot of these videos are just straight up hyperbole. Not that it's wrong to hold the opinion that these games are bad or whatever, you can think whatever you want to think. But 80% of these videos are just clickbait, over-exaggerated rant fest about games or movies that are, in all honesty, not as bad as people say they are. Many current animated movie releases are pretty bad. Disney in particular has gone down the drain and continues to make offensively bad garbage. A lot of the newest movies, I would generally agree with the popular consensus that they are not good, but it is comedic how with every single new animated movie, especially stuff like DreamWorks or non-Disney studios, you see clickbait thumbnails about it being the worst thing ever, when a lot of the movies are just bland, mediocre, definitely not as bad as like the live-action remakes or whatever the fuck else Disney is doing. But like, you get the idea. They're not as terrible as the thumbnails and titles are saying they are. But the more clicks you get, the more money you make, and anger drives clicks. In fact, many of these games can even be wonderful pieces of art, but people will still shit on them for views or to be a contrarian. Now, straight off the bat, I want to establish that I do not think it's wrong to criticize bad things. Everyone has opinions, and expressing those opinions is good. And just because you have a different opinion from me personally doesn't mean that you're wrong or that your opinion is less valid. Games or movies or media wouldn't ever improve if fans never spoke up about what they like and don't like. I think it can be useful to point out the negative parts of a game so that the developers can see the criticism and hopefully improve on it. A famous example of this is the first Sonic movie. Everyone fucking hated Sonic's original design in that, as it was rather ugly, but when the fans spoke up about it and criticized it, they actually listened to the constructive criticism and changed Sonic's design to be closer to the cartoony game design, and therefore more visually appealing. I doubt anyone would still be a fan of the Sonic movie franchise if the animated characters still looked like that. I also think it's good to be outspoken about your negative opinions of things that you are a huge fan of, not just the series that you hate with a passion. Like, I'm a huge fan of Professor Layton. It's my favorite game series of all time, one I'd even call an underrated gem, and I highly recommend it if you've never checked it out. Those games each surround different intricate mysteries with wonderful stories and lovable, unique characters. Seriously, the NPCs aren't afraid to look a little unconventional when it comes to what people see as attractive, so it's not just skinny, boring, white Genshin Impact character ass for every design. It has a wonderful art style with a warm-toned color palette, beautiful hand-drawn cutscenes, and even voice acting. But even though I have all this praise for the Layton franchise, I'm not afraid to call out the flaws that I don't like. The 7th game in the series, Layton's Mystery Journey, is just very disappointing, for example. It establishes an extremely cool concept where Layton is missing, so his adopted daughter is taking over the mystery-solving role, with really lovable main characters who had so much potential, but the execution and writing is really lackluster. Instead of focusing on one big case, they focused on a dozen smaller cases, which works for games like Ace Attorney or even the Layton Brothers phone app, where you can have smaller cases in a larger mystery game. But it works better when those cases are interconnected and building to a bigger story, and Mystery Journey just isn't really utilizing that potential. It also split the game into far too many cases. Each case only gets about an hour of screen time, so you don't even have the time to build interesting plot twists or to connect with any of the characters. In fact, the game drags due to bad pacing, even with the extremely short cases. Ernest Greaves was my favorite character, and he turned out to be the plot twist villain of the game, wahaha! But the ending is so rushed that he doesn't even have time to do anything truly villainous or fun with the role.
Ernest Greaves, no more deceit.
Miss Layton, what are you talking about? How could you possibly think I was... Oh, what's the use? No doubt you figured everything out anyway, haven't you? Yes, it's true. I am Adamas.
Other Layton villains are famous for building giant mechs that destroy cities, or flooding the entire town with sand, but the most Ernest does is he makes some people sign a contract to hand all their money over. Woohoo! So yeah, I'm perfectly content calling out things that I find just disappointing and bad in a game series that I like. But I am also still able to recognize the positives of even the worst games. Mystery Journey is a poorly written and paced disappointment, but I can still call out when there are nice characters. Like the upbeat Catriel, somewhat shy pushover Ernest, and the grouchy old man of a dog Shirl. They have great chemistry since they all have contrasting personalities, for example. Or the game might have fun and interesting concepts like Cat getting framed for fucking murder, which is resolved in the stupidest fucking way possible, but that's besides the point. I'm not saying all popular YouTubers just flat out ignore the positives in a game or movie. Many of them give pros and cons, but I flat out disagree with a popular criteria that many people use to judge the quality of a piece of media. Now, I went over this already on a video I made about FNAF Security Breach, a game that everyone famously despises and overhates, despite the fact that it was, in my personal opinion, the best game in the series, and is actually a fantastic experience. But a lot of people judge games in a really strange way. Games are made up of a multitude of different elements: the gameplay, the writing, the music, the characters, art design, etc. I guess with the specific medium with games, a lot of gamers value the gameplay the most. If the gameplay is bad, then they think that the game is bad, even if everything else about the game is wonderful. Or maybe the gameplay is okay, but the game has a few other flaws, like some minor glitches, or maybe the visuals aren't perfect, and then gamers just think that the whole thing is shit. I can't change your opinion if you agree with that criteria, but in my personal opinion, it's kinda simple black and white thinking to just view games as only their gameplay. Games are an experience, a story that's meant to connect with your heart, and the gameplay is just one aspect of that, the fun part of a game that you can play. It is flat out disrespectful, in my opinion, to take the work that countless artists put into character models, writing, the music, etc., to say that it is inherently less important than the programmers making the gameplay. Any piece of media is like a puzzle, a sum of all of its pieces. I think that people need to look at the bigger picture to tell if a game is truly good or bad. You will rarely, if ever, have a movie or a game where every single aspect is flawless, so one or two of those puzzle pieces might not be as pretty as they could be. Yes, even your favorite masterpiece can't be 100% perfect. Sometimes one of the pieces might be so bad that it spoils the entire product, like a movie having an extremely offensive or bad message in the writing, despite competent shots or music. But if the overwhelming majority of the pieces are good, then I think you could call the game good, even if one or two elements aren't dazzling. You don't have to like a flawed game if you don't want to, but it is disingenuous as fuck to me to make a clickbait hour-long rant video calling some game or movie dog shit just because of a few flaws that aren't really that major. The most egregious example of this that I can think of is how people treat modern Pokemon. Now for reference, I've been playing Pokemon since I was a wee little lad. Black and White had just come out for a time frame reference. In the time sense, I have quite literally played a game from every single Pokemon generation. When I was 8 or 9, I would play the original first few generations on emulators, and I of course have physical copies of those old games today. I grew up with X and Omega Ruby and Moon and Ultra Moon, and as an adult, I went back and collected the games that I was too young and poor to have actually played, like Diamond, Soul Silver, Black, etc. Of course, that means that I have played the modern Pokemon games that everyone hates, like Swish and SV, and I'm able to compare them to the older games. And I know me saying this might upset some people, but in my personal opinion, Pokemon games are the same as they have ever been. Your childhood Pokemon games aren't the fucking Mona Lisa, while the Scarlet and Violet are horrible messes. You're just a grouchy old fart. What I mean by this is you'll see people who fucking rip Sword, Shield, Scarlet, and Violet a new asshole for... Hold on, I'm gonna read the list. Having bad graphics and animation. Being buggy. Not being anywhere near as good as the older 2D games. I want to dissect these points because I think they're all a little bit silly. So people think modern Pokemon has bad graphics. The textures are bad, just look at the bark on this tree! Or, ew, they're gross and cheapy! Ah! Because yes, all Pokemon games need to be as hyper-realistic as the fucking Detective Pikachu movie. Ignoring the fact that Pokemon actually is getting more advanced in graphics, in the most recent games, they've updated the models and you can actually see like fur and scale textures and shit. But I think wanting a super realistic look for Pokemon is a bad idea because Pokemon is inherently a cartoony and stylized series, and seeing a huge jump in graphics would likely look weird and disorienting. But also, famously, big games that do have gorgeous, hyper-realistic graphics, that will slow down the game itself, making it harder to run because more of the system's processing power is dedicated to generating those visuals. Do we really want Pokemon to, God forbid, run slower and piss off even more people just so that it can have fucking detailed bark on every tree? Which is something that is definitely 100% important to the game's story and impact, of course. No! Are you fucking crazy? Older 3D Pokemon games like Pokepark don't have fucking realistic bark on the trees, but those are still some of the best fucking games on the Wii because of the charming world and the fun time you get to have making friends with Pokemon. Most people will say that these, by today's improved standards, crappy graphics still look fantastic for what it is. Ultimately, a game can still be good, even with bad graphics, but modern Pokemon's graphics aren't even offensive enough for me to think that they are bad. You want bad graphics? Go fucking play like Zelda CGI or something. Also, I just want to point out that Pokemon has always had chibi player models outside of battle. You may just have had a harder time telling because it was pixel art before. I think Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is the smoking gun to tell whether a person's hate of modern Pokemon is valid or just performative. You don't have to like Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl's graphics if you don't want to, but for all intents and purposes, it is literally the exact same game as your beloved Diamond and Pearl. They literally tried to recreate the game as closely as possible except for the graphics, and if an art style change is enough to make you fucking hate the game you supposedly loved as a child, then I think your love of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl is very shallow. Also, the models are cute, fuck you! Another complaint I never understood was, the Pokemon aren't animated enough in battle. They need to be constantly moving like they were in Black and White. While ignoring that Pokemon do in fact have interesting idle animations. Like, what on God's earth are you talking about? Pikachu isn't just standing there, he will bounce his ears and his tail will move. Look at Rowlet spinning his head. Just because the Pokemon aren't constantly fucking waving their arms around doesn't mean that they're being still and boring. In fact, I actually think it would be massively distracting if they moved more than they currently do. The Pokemon is patiently waiting your command in battle. Of course it's sitting somewhat still and quietly. It wouldn't make sense if it wasn't. I do understand if you wish for more intense battle animations, like more hyperactive, more movement in the battle animations. That's fine to want, but I don't think the current animations are bad at all. Like, I don't think that they're worth ranting over, like so many people do. Moving on, people tend to get really fucking irritated at bugginess in games. They fucking despise glitches, no matter how small, and will fucking rave and rant over how they're ruining video games. I'll also bring up Security Breach as an example here, as that's another perfect example of people crying over bugs. I do think it's valid to complain about, massive glitches that prevent you from progressing in the game, but let's be real, a majority of glitches that you see people complain about in video games are extremely minor. Someone's model visually being a little bit bugged out but not having any impact on the gameplay, or God forbid, oh no, the character is clipping ever so slightly into the ground! I'll be fucking for real. Y'all are massive fucking babies! Shit like that will go unnoticed by most normal players just looking to have a good time with the game. Most of these glitches are only really encountered when you go out of your way to get them anyways, and they're easily patched out and usually have no impact on game progression whatsoever. If it's not impacting the way that you play the game, why are you crying about it? And if you still want to complain about the glitches, that's honestly fine. You can 100% do that. If you encounter some glitches and they inhibit your fun, you're allowed to speak up about it. But it's fucking hypocritical to pretend like Scarlet and Violet are massively glitchy messes and then fucking prop up the original Pokemon games as much better. Hello? Have you ever fucking played Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow? The game's famous for being a spaghetti mess of code held together by a shoestring and Game Freak's prayers? Scratch that, it's just held together by prayers. I don't even think it's held together with a shoestring anymore. Those games are so fucking broken. You can glitch the game to enter the Hall of Fame with a timestamp of 000, or encounter dozens of fucking missing no and glitch the fuck out of your inventory, encountering Mew or tons of other not usually encounterable Pokemon, and all of those glitches actually could break your fucking game if you weren't careful. Nothing in modern Pokemon can ever compare to the mess that is Red, Blue, and Yellow. And don't get me wrong, I fucking love these games! The bugginess is part of the charm. You can like a game with bugs, even bad ones. They shouldn't ruin the entire game for you unless it is a bug that actually prevents your progression. I just wish Pokemon fans weren't so clouded by nostalgia to prop up the old games as gold and the new ones as trash. Pokemon is the same as it ever was. The same themes, the same gameplay, the same level of bugs. But I do think that modern Pokemon has improvements that people fucking refuse to see. The stories are only getting better and better. The first few generations of Pokemon are a little lackluster with the story. Stop Team Rocket, get the badges. But ever since Black and White, I feel like each new game tries to make an innovative approach to having something fun with the characters and stories. The rivals and other characters are only getting more complex. Look at how Wally's character evolved in Oraz when compared to the original games. Sun and Moon had a wonderful story with Lily and Gladion. I went into Sword and Shield thinking it would be bad because I had heard all the hubbub of people disliking it, but the characters are compelling and they hype up the league as such a fun sporting event that it was invigorating playing through the final parts of that game. Not to mention that Legends Arceus is probably my favorite Pokemon game of all time with the incredible shit they did in that story, but to be fair, I feel like people actually like that one despite it being a modern Pokemon game. I honestly think Scarlet and Violet are some of the most innovative and amazing Pokemon games they have ever made. Not only was the concept incredibly fresh, a massive free roam world where there are 3 stories that you can choose to take on in any order, even switching between the stories at will so you can pursue whatever catches your fancy and giving the player more freedom, but each of these stories has lovable and super compelling arcs. Arven especially stands out as super emotional and just beautifully crafted. All the while, the game builds suspense and mystery surrounding the crater at the center of Paldea. It's sitting there the entire time, in your face but off limits, leading the player to wonder as to what awaits there. But you can only go there once you've finished all 3 of the main storylines, meeting different friends along the way. The stories are compelling enough to where you can actually get really attached to Arven, Penny, and Nimona, and it feels really emotional when you have to team up together to enter the great unknown as a team. And once you cross that threshold, you're thrust into a world unlike anything you've seen in the game up until that point. The music especially is so weird and off-putting and otherworldly, but also grand, and it builds a sense of wonder and intrigue. It quite literally took my breath away. And then you encounter weird otherworldly Pokemon, either from the past or the future depending on your game version, which only adds to the atmosphere. The strangeness really adds to the vibe, and the whole end of the story feels like you and your friends are uncovering some terrible secret that's greater than yourselves. The insanity of this is multiplied by 1,000 when it's revealed that the professor of the game was dead the whole fucking time and their consciousness was placed into a robot clone who you have to fight, while Arvin is having this big emotional moment since, the professor was his neglectful parent. All the while, the most insane bop of a boss fight theme plays. It's incredible. Also, the animations for the professors, where they're twitching slightly and robotically and they drop their Pokeballs from this high-up place while you're framed from down below, making them seem taller and intimidating, is really cool. Even if it wasn't your cup of tea, and I understand it not being your cup of tea, the story was certainly innovative and intense for Pokemon standards. It was creative. I just think that Scarlet and Violet present a really great concept in terms of the open and free storylines that all converge into this hella creative and mind-blowing endgame story, and that the characters are also well written and the music slaps. Are they perfect? Do these games have bugs, and could they possibly be improved by graphics or gameplay-wise? Sure, what game is truly perfected to that extent? I'm sure that there are many improvements that could be made to these games, but are they bad? Not necessarily. In my personal opinion, the good greatly outweighs the bad, so even if it's flawed, it's still a pretty good game that's worth experiencing. By all means, these games quality-wise are just as good as some of the old Pokemon games, but fans have trouble seeing that since their judgment is clouded with nostalgia. And again, to reiterate, I'm not saying modern Pokemon is perfect. I do know that they've had issues with rushing their game designers so the game doesn't come out as perfect as it could be, which that does suck, and it's fair to call that stuff out. And also it's 100% fair to say, hey, I wish the visuals were like this, or I found this bug and I'm bothered by it, or I don't like the direction that this game is headed in. All that stuff is fine to say, but the faults of modern Pokemon tend to be really greatly over-exaggerated by people online, and that's supposed to be the point of this video. Over-exaggeration and hyperbole. Though I recognize I'm kind of jumping all over the place, rambling with this one, I'm sorry if this video isn't as cohesive as I'd like it to be. And Pokemon's not the only fandom where people are guilty of doing this over-exaggerative rant about how the games are declining in quality. Sonic is another prime example. I feel like the fans have chilled out a little bit nowadays, since people like the current Sonic games, like Frontiers and X Generations, I think. I don't know. But there was a time where you could absolutely not make Sonic fans happy, no matter what you did, even if you catered to them. The voice actors are bad because it's not the people who voiced Sonic when I was a kid. The gameplay and levels are bad. The characters and story are bad. And while there are some Sonic games that I think it would be valid to think that they're bad, like Sonic 06 is infamously glitchy, I still love it, even if the bugginess is messy and the cutscenes are hilarious. It's got this, childhood nostalgia charm to me, and I can fully admit that. But a lot of people do the same thing where they rant about games that are average in terms of Sonic games. People complain about Shadow the Hedgehog 2005, or Sonic Heroes, for example, for being awful games, with the former being so edgy that it was laughable, but they complain about the gameplay and stuff like that when, in all honesty, the mechanics are pretty similar to Sonic Adventure 2, which is still beloved and praised. Really, is Shadow the Hedgehog that different from it gameplay-wise? You still run around the levels with largely the same mechanics, with homing attacks, spin dashing. I guess the guns are different, but the guns are also funny and fun as fuck. But one game gets way more hate and criticism than the other. You can dislike Shadow all you like for its story and edginess, but it feels a little disingenuous when people prop up SA2 as this masterpiece, when it has just as many problems as any other Sonic game from that era. If Sonic Adventure 2 came out today, people would be bitching about the graphics, voice acting and line delivery, and also the gameplay. But because it came out at a time when all the loudmouth Sonic fans were too young to be critical of stuff, everyone loves it. Okay, sorry. I know that was really mean of me to say. I'm being a meanie pants right now. Don't take that last thing as a personal critical attack. I just think it's worth pointing out how, as people age and grow older, they tend to think more analytically about things, and so things from their childhood they might look at with rose-tinted glasses. For the record, I love all of these games, and I think they're pretty good. I have nothing against Sonic Adventure 2, it just feels like a little bit of a double standard, if that makes sense. It is largely a matter of nostalgia. A big portion of the internet is in their 20s and 30s. At least those are usually the people making video essays. So that would be people born in around the 90s or 2000s. If you experience a piece of media as a small child, you're more likely to overlook its flaws since your critical thinking skills haven't fully developed, and as we grow older, we tend to notice and be able to formulate better if the quality of something isn't up to speed. So that is fully why I believe people say things like modern Pokemon is ass while the older games are gold. Maybe you could argue that the games have marginally declined in quality in your opinion, but the downgrade isn't all that massive compared to the older stuff. People just tend to notice it more now. Now, for all of the media discussed in this video, I am not saying that you're not allowed to hate these games, even if I think that they are overhated. In fact, yes, please, absolutely form your own fucking opinions about them. It's completely fine to have a good rant about something you don't like and you think could be made better. You might think it's kind of hypocritical for me to say this while also ranting about how negative people are, but I'm not trying to say that negative opinions are inherently bad. My point is that I think the internet is exaggerative for the sake of clickbait and views, and negative opinions are propped up so high that any positive opinions get drowned out. People bandwagon and just agree with whatever opinions are most popular. In fact, people are actively hostile to anyone with an opposing viewpoint. I've had people online fucking rant and cry at me when I express the opinion that, actually, I think people are wrong about this video game and it's good. People will come on my post and make rude-ass comments about me not being able to discern quality or being stupid for liking something. You know you can like stuff that's bad, you know that, right? I do. I'm not liking something that's bad, though. I have critically thought about it and come to the conclusion that I wholeheartedly believe that it is of good quality. You don't have to agree with that, but you also don't have to insult someone else's intelligence or critical thinking skills. I don't want to be that guy who cries ableism every time someone's mean to me just because I'm autistic, but some of the ways I've seen people act about different opinions online does border on that when you start to question people's intelligence. Just because someone has a different opinion than you does not mean that they are stupid or lesser. Just because they came to a different conclusion about the quality of something doesn't mean that they didn't think critically about its flaws. And even if someone wasn't thinking critically about the media they consume, it doesn't make them a bad person. You don't have to come at them and rant about how, oh, your opinion's wrong. They're just trying to enjoy something, so you should just leave them alone usually. Just because I'm really passionate about my favorite interests and I will defend them doesn't mean I'm less smart at analyzing stuff. In fact, I did study media production and I worked with this documentary academy when I was younger, and part of that was learning how to critically analyze the creation of media. I'm not perfect either. I've said mean things about other people's opinions before. I think being nice and respectful when you're upset is something that everyone can and should work on. But while I have made some insults, either in this video out of frustration, like saying I think that an opinion is silly, please keep in mind these aren't personal attacks or directed towards anyone specific. I don't go up to people and say, oh, you hate modern Pokemon? You like fucking Huggy Wuggy or bullshit that media that I don't like? You're stupid! So why do people feel comfortable ganging up on others when it's an unpopular opinion? I'm not mad that people have different opinions, but it's kinda shitty that you get attacked by immature little kids and sometimes even full grown-ass adults for that. Why is it always the damn terminally online 17-year-olds getting personally offended when I say FNAF is good or some shit? It's so annoying and it's happened to me multiple times. Hopefully they grow out of it in a few years, but Jesus, man. Also, I think I need to mention that while negative opinions get the most traction online because rage drives clicks, I don't think it necessarily means that the general public hates a game just because many YouTubers are ranting about it. I saw so many people hating on the Minecraft movie, which I also hate for a multitude of reasons, but that's not relevant right now, but it still made a boatload of money and kids and general audiences thought it was funny. Just because the negative opinions are the most vocal doesn't necessarily mean that they are the most popular. There is no movie or game where everyone in the world will feel the 100% exact same way about it. I just wish the algorithms promoted all sorts of different kinds of reviews equally. Positive, angry, mixed. It just feels harder to stumble across the positive content unless you seek it out sometimes. Ultimately, my message is to just think critically about the media you consume. Criticize the negatives, but don't overlook the positives. Form your own opinions. Think about all the elements in a game and decide for yourself what you think is important in judging a game's quality. You don't have to agree with anyone else. You don't even have to agree with me either. You can agree with the popular consensus if you want. Feel free to hate on any game I praise or love a game that I hate. Just try to think about why you feel the way that you feel. Anyways, that's gonna be all from me for now. Feel free to start an absolute mega war in the comments about how I'm a dumbass with no taste or critical thinking skills because I like Pokemon or something.